Hello and welcome to our fifth lesson in the Scottish Wars of Independence High History course. Today we're going to be looking at the problem of the Maid. Today's session we are aiming to recap what we've learnt so far about our background to succession crisis, and we're going to be looking as well at the problem posed by choosing the Maid as the next ruler of Scotland. By the end of this session we should be able to describe and explain the problems posed to Scotland by choosing the Maid. We're going to have a wee look back and recap how we got to this point so far, so looking at how the succession crisis has evolved from 1249 through to 1286, and we're going to look forward to discussing our plans in the year ahead in the High History course. So where have we got to so far in the course? So through our first sessions in the last 4 videos we have covered first of all the golden age of Scotland. Now this covered the reign of King Alexander III. Now 1249 to 86 saw a period of change where Scotland put a lot of its troubles behind itself, and King Alexander III took the reins and built the kingdom up. He got rid of the Vikings, if you remember, at the Battle of Largs in 1263, which meant Scotland as a kingdom took the Western Isles back. He also crushed the rebellious Northern Earls up in Caithness and up in Skye, made sure that the nobles all recognised him as the top dog and the boss in the kingdom, which made things much calmer. He invested a lot of the money from this peace, because obviously trade grew up while Scotland is not having to bother itself with enemies and wars. So a lot of this trade money was reinvested into building castles to defend the kingdom against any future attacks, and monasteries to make Alexander basically beloved by the church, and also to provide schools where the nobles of Scotland, the younger generations anyway, would go to be educated to ensure that the kingdom would become a thriving place in years to come. So he's looking towards the future of Scotland. He's building up its trade base. He is making sure that we have a platform of security and peace, and amongst that the kingdom flourishes. These are good times. However, all good times come to an end, and for Scotland at this time, that time was 1286, when we learned Alexander, foolishly, in his prime, the age of 45, got himself in this stupid situation and was thrown from his horse while trying to ride home in the midst of a storm and pitch blackness, and broke his neck. So that ended the life of our king and ended his very long and peaceful and prosperous reign, and it set us on a course to, well, as we're going to find out, chaos. These are definitely going to be bad times ahead. So in the immediate aftermath of his death, we learned that in April 1286, the community of the realms, that's all the bishops and nobles, came together and they discussed who would be recognised as the next ruler of Scotland. And that's set up against a background of internal unrest. Scotland was faced with civil war at that time, because the Bruce faction and the Balliol faction were pressing to be recognised as the next rightful rulers and to take the throne for themselves. But one family would never have accepted the other family stepping up and taking the role as top dog, so that would have created a war. The community of the realm come together. This is the landowners of Scotland, the ones with the money, the nobles and the bishops. At that time, the kind of bishops are the princes of the church, and they own an awful lot of land in the kingdom, so they have a say at the top table. And the community of the realm, in a very mature way, elected 6 guardians to rule Scotland on behalf of the Maid of Norway, Alexander III's granddaughter and the only living direct relative who had a rightful, clear claim to the throne. And she is going to be recognised as the next ruler of Scotland, and these guardians are going to run the show basically until she grows up. At this point, 1286, she is either 2, going on 3 years old, so there's going to be a long time ahead. These guardians are going to be pulling on the reins of power until she arrives and is old enough to do the job herself. Now that didn't go down with everyone, as we learned very well. The Bruce faction took umbrage at this, and they decided to launch a coup, or an armed rebellion, against the control of the guardians. Now this old lad, Bruce, the 5th Earl of Carrick, decides to make his move and start a power play to take the throne. He formed something called the Turnberry Band, which is a loose network of nobles down in southwest Scotland, including one of the guardians, the Baron of Renfrew, and they try to gather an army in order to seize the throne. Now they take a few royal castles down in southwest Scotland, in kind of Dumfries and Galloway nowadays, in the expectance that they're creating a bridgehead for a supporting army to arrive and land from Northern Ireland. The army, however, failed to materialise, which gave the Guardians a chance to gather their own forces and basically force the Turnberry Band to give up. So in this case, there was no Brucey bonus. He did not manage to seize the throne. So after that, 1286 to 1290, the Guardians have their difficulties, as we learned, but they remained in control. Now, some of those difficulties included the Earl of Fife was murdered by one of his relatives because he was accused of lining his own pockets from his position. And there was almost another instance of civil war when two of the Guardians, the common Guardians in the common family, faced rivalry with the Earl of Atholl up in northeast Scotland, which almost bubbled over into armed conflict. And in amongst all this as well, the Isle of Man, which had been under Scottish control since Alexander gained it after the Vikings left back in the mid-1260s, the Isle of Man decides to take advantage of the situation and rebel. In amongst all this, though, the Guardians do keep on going, and Scotland is not torn apart by war. I chose to do well, and this is a more general thing looking ahead for the year to come. It is important that you are making good notes as we go through our course. Now, as I go through these videos or PowerPoints with you, the information that appears in bold, you should be noting down in your notebook or in your jotter or in a Word document, as those are the key points that you're going to need to know in order to answer the questions that come up. Now, questions that come up, I'm talking about exam level questions, so ones like the how fully question we've just seen. You're also going to get evaluate the usefulness type questions thrown at you. You'll have explain questions, and you'll have this new two-source how much question as well. In order to have a KU to build into your answers for these, you need to have a good body of notes, and those notes are going to come from these lessons that you've been going through and from these notes you've been taking from the information given in bold. Remember, you do not need to write down everything that comes up in the videos. I'm just looking for you to take a note of the information in bold. The idea of this is that come assessment times, I'll look at prelims, final exams, I want you to be, by that point, have accrued a full big set of notes that you can just flip to and refer to the relevant section and get the information as you need it. It means that the work you're doing as we go through the year has got use and it's got value, and it's something that you can use as your own personalised guide to make sure that you do as well as you possibly can when those assessments come around. It's also where you're going to find out the information you need to do your homework assignments, so these questions that we tackle as we go through the course. So when writing up your answers to questions, either note the question down or refer to it in your answer. Give good detail in your answers so that they're useful to you. As good practice when you're answering questions, is always key to refer back to the question to make sure that the points you're giving are always relevant. This is going to make sure that you get the marks that you deserve. Now, your jotter, your notebook, however you're taking your notes down, should be your study guide for the exams. You've been compiling this over the last 4 lessons so far, the last 4 videos. This is why you got to take care and effort to make it as good as possible. It is not the least important thing. It is the most important thing that you're doing as you go through this section of the Scottish Wars course. That body of notes is what's going to guarantee your exam success when they eventually roll around. So make sure that you keep these notes safe, that you constantly add to them every time we have a new lesson. This should become basically your higher history Scottish topic Bible as we go through the year ahead. Now, genuinely aim to meet your deadlines as well. When you're set a deadline date for an assignment or a question, please make sure you get it in for that time. This is for your stress levels and your mental health as much as it is for mine. It gets very easy to fall behind if you neglect to meet your deadlines, and suddenly you face having a mountain of work to wade through and to hand in to me, and it can become very, very stressful as it adds up very, very quickly, especially as, bear in mind, you're going through your year with not just this hire but all your other courses as well, and I'm sure they'll all have demands upon your time too. So please do try and meet those deadlines so that you don't get faced with this mounting backlog of work that becomes just this psychological mountain sitting on top of you. It'll be far easier if you do it, get it shifted, meet your deadline, and also it's good training for that next step in life when you're going on to work or you're going to college, university. People are going to set you deadlines and you're going to have to meet them, because the consequences of that in the outside world are far worse than not meeting them in school. So it's a good habit to get into. As we go through the Scottish topic course, practice the source questions and get good at your technique. So obviously you've been building up your notes with your guide here. However, it's obviously useful that you can actually employ those notes and put them into practice and practice those questions. It's good to get on top of how you do them before we get around to the prelims. You need to know how to do each one of those 4 questions and have them in the bag by the time we get to that stage. So we've done 1. Obviously we're going to come back and revisit the how fully question, give you more practice again, but we've got another 3 to get through, and therefore you're going to have a good working knowledge of all the different question types before any big assessments come around. Now, reading is a skill. It needs practice. You need to read to improve your ability and understanding and to find the answers you need more easily. Now, this is a skill that is going to help you in all your subjects this year. When you're working at higher level, it is more demanding than obviously the stuff that you've met in National 5 on the way through. When I'm asking you about your reading, it's not just that I'm hoping for you to be reading notes and going through videos on the topic content I'm putting out. I'm talking about just your general reading. Now, it might be history-based books. It might be that you're just reading novels and picking up a book that you get into. It might be that you're reading blogs or journals, or you're into some particular thing. It might be that you've got a real passion for a hobby or a sport and you like reading around that and learning about it. Please do keep up your reading, because that constant intake of information or reading through the literature builds up your understanding of the language and the grammar and just gets you in the habit of reading. So when you get faced with these sources that will come at you in the higher exam, or you are researching your next essay or getting ready for your big assignment that you're going to hand in, reading shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be something that's difficult. It should be something that comes to you naturally. And for that to happen, you need to be reading on the regular. Now, a little bit of a fun one to look for the year ahead is this man, Neil. Listen closely to him when he pops up. He will often have the answers. His History of Scotland series, giving us 2 episodes which directly cover our course content, and I'll be sampling them as we go through the course. Usually he'll give you supporting information or detail on the stuff that we're directly being asked questions about in the course. He also recently made a series called Rise of the Clans, and one of his episodes deals directly with Robert the Bruce. He is super useful, so look out for him. If you can get hold of his material, please do so if you get the opportunity to get it. So, moving on. The problem of the Maid, and back to today's task. The Maid was installed by the Community of the Realm in 1286 and recognised as the next ruler of Scotland. But obviously, because of her age, she wasn't going to be able to do the job for some time yet to come. In this section here, I would like you to build this mind map, build this diagram. So by 1290, when the Maid is grown up, she's about 6 or 7, the Maid of Norway has been decided on as Scotland's next ruler. This is a formal thing, this is what everyone expects is going to happen. But this, of course, is going to cause problems for our kingdom. Even 4 years in, we still have, in essence, a 6 or 7 year old wee girl as the top power in Scotland. Obviously, she can't exercise that power yet, she's too young. But this ongoing situation has still got years to go. So it's creating problems for the day-to-day running of the kingdom, and also for us years down the line, potentially. Now, what I'd like you to do as part of this is have a think, what are the problems for a medieval kingdom in having such a young girl placed upon the throne? I would like you to fill out this mind map. Now, I'm going to give you some of the ideas to add into this, but by no means all of them. So here's the first one up. She is, when she gets the job in 1286, only 2 years old. How on earth can you have a 2-year-old as your ruling person in a kingdom? So what I'd like you to do around the centre of your mind map is to cluster in the problems, but outside of that, and you may want to colour code it like I have on the screen here, I want you to explain why these things are a problem for the kingdom. And this is trying to get you to exercise a kind of powers of reasoning and analysis. So if she's only 2 years old, an example of this, why it's a problem, she's too young to rule the kingdom by herself, and it's going to be for years to come. Another problem that's going to stem from this is the regents will have to rule until she's old enough to do so herself. Now, in this case, the regents for us are the guardians. Now, we learned about the struggle of the guardians in our last session there, and within even just a couple of years of these 6 men being placed in charge, we're down to 5 because Earl of Fife gets murdered and he's not been replaced. And the Guardians are faced with all these different forces that are pulling on the Kingdom of Scotland. So we've got the Bruce and the Balliol rivalry, we've got potential armed rebellions, we've got parts of the kingdom trying to break off. We don't have one constant decision being made by one person at the top of the government, as it normally runs in medieval society. So we've got potentially disagreement amongst the Guardians. We also learned, remember, that different members of the Guardians are allies of these powerful houses that are trying to pull Scotland apart. So we know the Baron Renfrew is friendly with the Bruces, whereas we know the 2 common Guardians from up in the northeast of Scotland are actually directly related to the Balliol family, who are on the other side of this power struggle with the Bruces and the Balliols. So we've got all this disagreement just amongst this ruling council. So that's going to be bubbling away potentially for years to come. And how's that going to affect the security of the kingdom in the long run? Kind of plays out almost a bit like an episode of Game of Thrones. We also are faced with the risk of childhood mortality. Now, we discussed quite a few sessions ago now that the average age in medieval Europe was 40 for life expectancy, and one of the main reasons behind that was the high instance of childhood mortality. 1 in 3 children are expected not to reach the age of 5. So if the Maid of Norway is being nominated as the next ruler of Scotland and she's only 2, it's by no means a done deal that she is going to grow up and actually live to adulthood. So that's a big problem facing the Guardian. She's obviously far too young to produce the next stage in Alexander III's royal line. So it's a kind of fingers crossed number until she grows to adulthood. Will she survive? So that's an example of what I'm looking for you guys to reason through here. Now I'm going to give you some other problems around the Maid being nominated as ruler of Scotland. So one I'd like you to think about is she's from Norway. How is that going to pose a problem to the future of Scotland? Another problem to think about is her gender. It is very, very, very unusual in Western Europe that a woman is placed into a position of high authority, especially the highest authority. So how is that going to pose a problem for Scotland? And remember, medieval life is a lot more sexist than in the world that we live in today. So think about what problems that's going to create for the kingdom and problems for the Maid herself. And lastly, what happens when she gets married? So looking ahead, when she gets to adulthood and we're thinking about bringing another party into the mix here, how is that politically going to affect the balance of the kingdom? How do we choose that husband for the Maid to make sure that the royal line continues and we get the next generation in? Now, these are just some of the problems. If you come up with extra problems yourself, if you want to add them in, by all means, please do. Your task for next session then is going to be to expand on each one of these problems, as I have an example up in the top left about her age. And when we come back in our next session next time, we're going to review those problems and the deeper explanations of what problems they present to the future of the Kingdom of Scotland. So, looking back over today's session, Scotland's future has been decided, and it seems that the danger has passed. We've decided on someone to essentially take over from Alexander III. We've got the Guardians in place to rule. We have got an awareness of the challenges that are ahead. The immediate danger, though, of civil war and the kingdom being torn apart by the Bruce and the Balios seems to have passed. The Guardians have shown that they are on top of the job. So between 1286 to 1290 or so, things are kind of rattling along, and it seems that the danger has passed. Or has it? We'll find out in future sessions. So that's it for today's session, guys. Thanks very much. See you next time.